how important it was what happened, right? People looked at it maybe in a superficial way where they didn't want Jesus to suffer, and they tried to maybe like do things that would stop it from happening. But did Jesus want it go along with that? Like say Peter, right? Peter wanted it, like he said, no, if that happens, I'll get in there. And then he actually did something.
Yeah.
And what did Jesus do? He said, right on, Peter. Thank you for having my back.
No.
No, right? He said, wait a minute. No, this has to happen. Jesus knew it had to happen, right? Okay. So there's a lot of themes, and you can say revelations, truths in this story, right? Can you guys think of some? Because I have my list here, but I want to see what kind of themes in the story, right? When he was handed over to the Romans, and then the Romans crucified him, all the way to where he died and was buried. Okay, that's what we're covering, and we all know the story, so we're going to talk about themes, right? We're going to go through the story, but we're going to talk about these themes. What comes to your mind? The truths that are revealed through this story.
Well, we have in chapter 14, remember that Jesus was tried. That was like the church trial. And then the church trial said, oh, you say you're the Son of God, that you're worthy, that's blasphemy, you're worthy of the death sentence. So we understand that the Jewish people couldn't kill people, so the church went and took Jesus to the state, to the civil power. So now from 15 it starts that they're taking Jesus to Pilate.
Right. So there's like a lot of politics and strategy going on, right?
Church and state.
But what was their goal?
To kill Jesus.
Right. They wanted to kill him. They wanted to get rid of him. Why did they want to get rid of him?
They hated him. They envied him.
It was a threat to their religion.
Right. Yeah, his influence.
Threat, not just to their religion, but threat to
economy.
Yes, sir. He wants to say something.
No, I don't think it was a threat to their religion. I think it was a threat to their power.
To their personal.
Yeah.
Personal power.
Their standing, their power. Okay. So, good. Anything else?
I think that it's interesting that Pilate originally didn't want to do it. He was like, nah. He tried to put it back on them. Like, I don't see anything wrong with him. I don't see anything wrong. And eventually he ends up giving in. But
So he was a good guy?
I think he doubts.
It's a trick question.
Yeah, I don't know if he was a good guy, but he definitely was not seeking to kill a man for what he thought.
He recognized something, right? He recognized something that probably everybody knew, and were either ignoring or pretending that it wasn't the case.
Yeah.
That Jesus was totally innocent, right? Okay. Anything else?
Outsider to see that.
Anything else? No, the outsiders, and then, obviously, I'm going to look at my watch just to make sure I pace myself. Anything else? We're talking about themes, truths, revelations in the story, which is called the Passion Narrative.
We see how the conversation between Pilate and Jesus took place, and the way Jesus spoke, and how he stood quiet, and how Pilate looked at him like, there's something that he's not arguing with me. So that had a strong impression on Pilate.
Okay. All right. He knew it was different. He recognized something in him. Anything? Brother Vincent? Any themes that come out in it? There's tons of them, right? Just to kind of get the conversation started.
Well, Pilate's wife had
even she recognized it. Right.
And she's sent a message to him and said, hey man, leave this guy alone. But even then he was more inclined to fulfill the wishes of the folks there as opposed to the wishes of his wife.
Right.
Yeah.
Or even his own conviction, right? He was saying, well, to use that word, but he knew in a lot of ways that Jesus was not really somebody who had even violated the law, right? Yeah. And he still did it. He still did, knowing what that was going to entail. Okay, so let me give you some ideas, and then as I tell you these things, try to make the connection where you see it, because we're actually going to explore these things, right? The first one is just like the rest of the Bible. This is a revelation of the character of God, right? Who is Jesus? What is his intent? What kind of a God is he? Okay? Because there will be people that are going to argue with you on what kind of a God he is. This is the ultimate showing of what he is about. What Jesus is about, his character, right? Right? Always think about that. When you see something, think, what does this tell me about God's character? So think about it in your mind. There was a lot of prophecy that was fulfilled, right?
Yes.
And just in case we don't have time specifically, and we've studied each and every one of these, Isaiah chapter 53, Psalms 22,
22 verse 1.
and Daniel 9, 20 something through, let me see, I have it written here. Daniel 20, there it is. Daniel chapter 9, 24 through 27.
Yes.
Okay? There was a lot of prophecy that was fulfilled. And I was even taking note on last week's test, the one Robert gave, on all the prophecies that were being either given or fulfilled, right? There were more given, prophecies that were given. In lesson 11, there were some short-term prophecies, like he knew that they were going to meet up with this person in the upper room, right?
That's right.
And then they let him in and they had everything prepared for him. He knew that Peter was going to deny him, and even that the disciples were going to scatter as soon as he got caught. And obviously he predicted his own death in Gethsemane. And he knew that Judas was going to betray him. All those were prophesied. They were like short-term prophecies. They were just going to happen within days or hours. Okay? There was also long-term prophecies. The woman that washed his feet, right? And the establishing of the Last Supper service where he said this woman will be remembered for, as long as the gospel is spread, right? And then when he told the Sanhedrin, and you'll see the Son of Man referring to himself, right? Coming in the clouds of heaven, right? That was a prophecy. And then the fact that we're dealing with the Passover, right? What's the Passover? What animal did they slay in order? Well, I mean, what does the Passover signify, right? What is the Passover a ceremony to commemorate? Exodus, when they were in Egypt, and the Pharaoh claimed that last plague, which he says, we're going to kill all your firstborn. And then Moses freaked out, oh no, this is actually going to happen to you. And in order to protect, they used lamb's blood to put in the door to save for salvation.
Yes, the angel will pass
Okay?
right over.
And doom passed by them. They were saved by the lamb's blood. Does that even sound familiar? They were saved by the lamb's blood. So even the Passover, where everybody's sitting, foretold of Jesus' coming. Okay? So you know when later on, when after he comes back and he meets those two disciples, he starts telling them the Bible, all the things that point to him. Because everything, Daniel, Isaiah, and Psalms are all in the Old Testament. And they all point to Jesus, right? So that's one of the lessons we learn also, right? There's a lot of prophecy. Okay. So you look at what Jesus did, right? You look at Jesus' character of unselfishness, love. And guess what? He had to trust his Father. Because he was about to die. And he knew it. And he had to trust his Father. His Father was going to bring him back. He had prophesied, I'm going to bring down the temple and then bring it back in 3 days, right? So he was already putting his faith out there. He knew it was going to happen. And he trusted that his Father was going to take over and bring him back. Okay? So faith and love of Jesus. But what does this whole thing say about the state of mankind? The state of mankind. Man who be willing to torture somebody, an innocent person, humiliate them, treat them bad, even if they know they're innocent. They knew he was innocent, right? And they were still willing to do it. And this wasn't like, even the fact that he wasn't the only person who ever got crucified. There was other people. It was just happening almost like an industry. The guys who were doing it, they were already desensitized to it. This was the state of man. And it wasn't just the people who were physically hurting him. It was the people who sent him there that knew what was going to happen, that were willing to do it for their own selfish reasons. So you compare Jesus' character to everybody else, right? Not everybody else. Most of the people that were making this crucifixion happen, okay, on different levels, okay? Even Pilate. Pilate's like, poor me, I have this dilemma, I got to worry about the people, and then this guy who's innocent, okay, I'll choose the people, you know? He chose the easier way in the end. He didn't have an easy decision, I'll give him that. But he didn't choose based on God's character. He chose based on his selfishness and wanting to, his own fear, his own selfishness of not wanting to lose power. His threat was to lose power. If everybody would start to rebel, and then you'd get in trouble with the emperor. Why can't you control these people, right? So that's going on every different level if you think about it, okay? So this is kind of how I approach this, because we know the story, right? We know what happens. We know the details, but I want to look at things. Also, the crowd that was looking at him, the crowd that was saying things, the crowd that was reacting. He was saying things and they were reading it a certain way. All that matters too, okay? A lot of people think, the crowd, they didn't recognize it was Jesus. But we have to ask ourselves, would we have done the same? Well, now we have the Bible is telling us, the Bible's spoon-feeding us the information, right? They're telling us it's Jesus, and they're telling us that the crowd didn't recognize him. But we have to ask ourselves, are we the crowd? Okay? Are we the crowd? Would we have... We know Jesus is coming back in the clouds, right? So we're definitely going to recognize him, right? But in our character, would we have... Because we have to have that character that would have recognized Jesus, okay? Would we have had that character that's a John or Peter that did recognize him and knew who he was, right? Even Joseph of Arimathea was willing to put himself at risk to help out Jesus, just to show some compassion. It says in the Bible, he was waiting for the judge.
The kingdom.
The kingdom? Yeah.
He was waiting for the kingdom of God.
Right. He was waiting for the kingdom of God. Thank you. He had that faith enough to put himself at risk in front of the Sanhedrin, right? Mm-hmm. So you look at those. You look at the character of God and who had that character and who didn't, and how far the character of man has fallen by that point, because that points to Jesus' own suffering, right? Did Jesus just suffer physically?
No, spiritually.
He suffered in spirit. Mm-hmm. He suffered in spirit. And Ellen White says he suffered more in spirit. That he probably, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but he probably died of a broken heart about what he was seeing around him. Okay? And think about his character. He's saying, please, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Even as they were doing it to him. Okay? Is the character of God... Did he say, hey, I'm going to get you guys, just wait till I come back? No, he was saying, look, man, I'm willing to say, hey, you know? His heart was breaking for the very people that were hurting him.
I think Pilate is almost like an example of modern man, because modern man says, what is truth? And he's the one that asked Jesus. And Jesus told him, I'm a king, but not of this world, and I'm here for those who hear the truth. And then Pilate said, what is the truth? It's like modern man's is postmodern. There's no truth. Right. Everything's relative. And then he says that and gets up and leaves. And that was I think Pilate's chance to what is the truth? And maybe
which makes you wonder, because people that feel they're we're progressing, we're going to. Did they really progress, or they're still the same as what they were 2,000 years ago? Did they progress in any way? You got to ask yourself that too, right? So yeah, good point. I'm glad you made that point.
An excuse, what is truth, allows you to, when you see the truth, to ignore it. You know, like, I could do what I do because my own selfish needs. Free will.
So there's two more things that I have here. One of them is the good news and the transformation that can happen in each of us because of Jesus. Okay? And there's two instances when that happens. One of them is in Mark. The other one is in another book. But there is transformation that's happening. okay? In real time. Okay? And then the new covenant. There's something that actually happens during this story that's a symbol of the new covenant. And what that is, I'm hoping we have enough time. We got a half an hour to go. Let's just kind of go through this and see where each of these things sort of fit in. Okay? I wanted to say this first. I could have used that as a conclusion, but what if we don't, we always run out of time. So let me try to get as many of it. But think about the things that I tell you, because there's so much. Every time you hear a story, a lot of us go straight to, oh, he suffered, and you feel bad, and part of you is horrified because of what he went through, and like, what would it be like? But beyond that, you got to think about how he suffered for the hearts and the souls of the people that were doing this to him. Because he knew that their sin was destroying them. Okay, he knew that. And I think that hurt him more than anything else. How doomed they were by their own actions and their own sins. Okay? All right. So, in Sunday's lesson, so Pontius Pilate, who was he? He was a Roman governor. He had authority over Jerusalem under the Emperor of Rome. And the Jewish leadership did not have the authority to execute people, like you guys said, but they wanted Jesus dead. So they had to go through him. Okay? So, and Luke 13:1 talks about how he was not afraid to kill people. Okay? So my little trick question, was he a good guy? It's not for me to say, but he had shown cruelty. Okay? He was capable of cruelty. So what was the charge against Jesus, right? The lesson states that the charges in Mark were actually never explicitly stated. They didn't say, we charge you of this. But because he called himself the Son of Man, and that referred to Daniel, and the Messiah, the Anointed One, can also be translated into king, right? Yes. And when they did ask him if he was king, he did not deny it, okay? But was he in competition with the Emperor of Rome? Was he a direct threat to Rome?
No.
Did he come here to overthrow Rome?
No.
Not like people thought, right? So let's think about, there was a misunderstanding. We know this already. There's a misunderstanding on the population about what Jesus' role even was and the Messiah's role. They did not know why he was here. They thought he was going to come in and kick out the Romans, and and this continues, right? Because we look in the prophecy of when Jerusalem was destroyed, there was a rebellious spirit in Jerusalem. If you look, that was playing a part of everything. What do you call? What's their name? They had a name. The Zealots, right? They were like attacking Romans. They were doing a lot of stuff. Barabbas was one of them. There was that going on, and it kept growing. It kept growing until Rome finally came and just destroyed everything, right? Which was prophesied in Daniel.
Yes.
Okay.
70 AD.
But think about it. That whole rebellion was entering into Pilate's mind when he made his decision, right? He didn't want to stir the crowd up, so he gave them what they wanted. So that even that politics and all that, the strategy that's going on, played a part in the decision that was made. People cared more about their personal power, their careers, their politics, than sparing an innocent man who everybody pretty much knew was innocent. I think it was very clear. Okay. So the Sanhedrin charged him blasphemy, but that is not a Roman crime. Okay. And so they couldn't kill him based on that. So they kind of turned it around and said, oh, he's claiming to be the king. And so they turned that accusation into sedition, rebellion, right? If you're saying you're the king or you're the son of God, the emperor was saying that he was the son of God. So you're in direct conflict with that, right? Sedition. And we see it in a lot of ways in other, even Daniel, right? And so, but both of them were accusers, right? They were making accusations, and those accusations were not accurate, but they were making accusations. The truth was that Jesus was God, and therefore he was the king of the Jews. And so when they asked him, are you the king of the Jews? What did he say?
It is as you say.
Thank you. It is as you say. He was a truthful man, right? And that is, that line, he was a truthful man, is actually in Isaiah, I believe, when he spoke the truth, okay? he wasn't going to deny it. Okay, even when he was silent for most of the time, when they asked him a direct question, he goes, "Yeah, that's why I'm." Did you want to say something?
I find it interesting that he didn't say yes.
It is as you say. That's a yes to me.
Other
But
version says, if you, or like, you
If you
said
say
it,
so.
you say so, you said it, or like if you say so, yeah.
Right? You say so. So to me, there's a difference between saying yes versus.
But but it's not denying. It's not a. It's like, it's a good way of saying if you don't want to get into, like.
I think he said that because if he would have said yes, they doubted him regardless.
Yeah.
So it was up to them to
Correct,
decide in their
correct,
minds
Yeah.
whether
You're
they accepted
guilty.
him.
Yeah.
okay, so the lesson says he was a different kind of king. Was he a different kind of king?
Yes.
Why?
His kingdom was not of this world.
Thank you. But what does that mean? And I have something here. He doesn't rule the way the world does. He doesn't rule the way the world does. Okay? Okay, he doesn't get his authority like the world does. How does the world get their authority? Through threats, through power, survival, selfishness, greed. Right? Him dying and the way he died was an example of how people retain power. They wanted to hurt somebody so bad and humiliate them, and then they displayed them so that if anybody challenged that power, they would think twice. It was like a fate worse than death, right? In fact, they were kept alive in a way to suffer longer and to be on display.
Couple of days,
Yes, sir.
The lesson mentions that Jesus asked Pilate, "Are you saying this out of yourself, or did someone tell you?" Why did Jesus ask him that? I wasn't sure. Like,
I think when he's talking to him, I think he's asking him the questions like,
Yeah,
are you playing games? Because people sometimes they say stuff, or they just repeat what somebody else said, or do they really believe it? Right? I mean, that's not in Mark.
It's in John.
It's okay. So I didn't read it, but I know that that's in there, right? I remember that.
John 18.
Okay. So actually, next quarter we're going to be reading John, so we get into that. Okay.
Nice.
We're going to get into that. That's what I hear. That John is the next a quarter. Okay. So Pilate. This kind of addresses your question. Pilate refers to Jesus as the King of the Jews, but does he believe it? I don't think so. Obviously not, right? Therefore, it's sarcasm and mockery, right? Pilate hoped the crowd would release Jesus as a custom of the Passover. Barabbas was a bigger perceived threat by the Romans, so he wanted to get rid of Barabbas, but he had to weigh that against the crowd itself, right? If he didn't release him, sometimes we appease the crowd to just get things to the next, just to kick the can, but doesn't really solve the problem. But at what cost, right? He thought maybe they would just let Jesus go, thinking they would be just and saying, okay, this has gone far enough, let's just let Jesus go. But no, they said, no, we want him gone. To them, Jesus was a much greater threat than Barabbas ever was. Okay? Did Pilate really want to release Jesus? It's just a question. Do you think Pilate really wanted to release him? And the reason I ask that question is because he uses the term King of the Jews 3 times, right?
Yes.
And I know that term was irritating to the Sanhedrin. I know that, when you taunt somebody, right? Oh, the King of the Jews, he's your king. He's your king. So, I something that goes into my head. Because I don't look, and I can't read into his mind. I don't know why he was saying it. Maybe he was just saying, oh, well, how else do I refer him? I mean, he had a name, but yes, sir.
Even when at the cross they put on top,
Right.
they put King of the Jews. The Jew says, no, change it to, he says he's the King of the Jews.
Right.
He says, no, I'm going to put that.
So he was like, there was some provocation there,
Yeah,
right?
he
They
was
were playing
angry.
games with each other.
Yeah.
You have to look at, they're human, man. It's a power play in a way. He was provoking them. But I do believe that he knew that Jesus was not
Innocent.
He wasn't he wasn't doing any harm to anybody. Okay, let's see. Why don't we read Mark? Let's read the Bible. Let's read Mark 15:15. Everything in here, we're covering Mark chapter 15. So 15:15, if somebody could read that for me.
So Pilate, wanting to gratify the crowd, released Barabbas to them, and he delivered Jesus after he had scourged him to be crucified.
Okay, so he wanted to gratify the crowd, and he was willing to scourge Jesus for it. Okay, so did Pilate know what a scourging entailed?
Yes.
Not only did he know, he knew how many they knew how many lashes it would take to kill a person. So they took that number and they subtracted it by 1 or 2, right?
Yeah.
So that they would just take them to the edge of death but not kill them. Okay? That is horrific. If you think about it, that is the definition of torture. Okay? Yet Pilate was, he said, okay, fine, that's the choice I have to make. Ooh, poor me. So I don't think that even though Pilate knew, I think the more Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent, kind of the more it sort of indicts him. And I hope he repented at some point. So did the suffering begin when he was nailed to the cross? No, right?
Before.
He suffered the night before to the point where he was bleeding sweat.
Gethsemane.
He was sweating blood, sorry. The other way around. But the scourge is a merciless beating, right?
Yes.
And like I told you, it's counted by the number. It's not just, oh, okay, go ahead and do a few times or, whatever you think. They would count them. He also went through a lot of humiliation, right? They put on a purple robe. They parodied him. Parody's making fun of, right?
Yes.
If he says he's the king, let's treat him like a king, but not really. Kind of make fun of it. All right? So they kneel before him, pretending to say, and then they say hail in mockery. They spit on him repeatedly. You don't spit on somebody that you're, kneeling before, right? Crucifixions were often forced to carry their own cross naked. And according to the lesson, he was spared this one thing probably because this was all done to please the Jews, and the Jews objected to public nakedness, so they found it abhorrent. Therefore, they put his clothes back on. So in Mark, it says they put his clothes back on, and then they sent. And then there's a combination, the physical torture and humiliation, where they put the crown on, right? It's a mock crown, but it's hurting him. And then striking him repeatedly in front of each other. They didn't just want to hurt him. It seemed like the idea of a Jewish kingdom was a joke to them. And they seemed to have a disdain or contempt for the Jewish population. It wasn't just Jesus. They had a disdain for all the Jewish population. And I believe that's why they were kind of taunting not just Jesus, but the whole population. So this I'm going to talk a little bit about the state of humanity, if you want to call it that, at the time. Okay? So once the Roman soldiers were given the order, we're going to crucify, they knew what to do. And from all the laughter, they're probably not bothered by the suffering and seemed to enjoy it. Right? Although sometimes laughter kind of be a defense mechanism. But I think in general, they were mocking him and they were very deliberate in what they were doing. Jesus remained silent throughout the whole process. And I call it a process because it was a process of dehumanization. Okay? And systematic, right? But how did Jesus respond? In silence, right?
Silence.
And guess what? That was prophesied in Isaiah 53:7. Somebody just keep your Bible open to Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53. Although we're only going to go on 2 of them on Isaiah, but on Psalm. Does somebody have Isaiah 53:7? I don't have it written here.
He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a lamb before her shears is dumb. So he opened not his mouth.
Thank you. So this was a prophecy that was fulfilled, even in his silence, that everybody noticed how silent he was. Pontius Pilate noticed how silent he was. The guards noticed how silent he was. He was not talking. So this was really bad. So this is how man's law operates, right? Sir?
You ask yourself, why was he silent?
Do I ask myself?
Why was he so silent on all this? Why not defend himself? Why not say the truth?
I don't know if I have the answer, but I do know that if there's no point to it, he was going to be crucified. But if somebody has a better answer, I don't know.
I think you nailed it. I think there was no point, and he knew it. He knew this had to happen.
When at one point when he needed to say something, he did. Like one time I read when during the Jewish court, someone beat Jesus up, and he asked him, why did I do to you? So he did ask people things when he needed to do it.
Right.
But when it's not gonna change anything, or it would make him even angrier.
And the way he would ask a question was really like going straight to the heart.
Yeah.
He would ask him to answer the question, and while even though he didn't answer it maybe openly, he had to think about it. Why am I beating him? Yes, sir. You have an answer.
No, I was just
You're
thinking.
just curious? Okay.
I was just
There's
thinking. It's a. You know, when you're silent, you're innocent. You're silent. It angers people, right? It irritates them. Why aren't you defending yourself? Why aren't you trying to clean up your name? But in another sense, it's like a mirror. You look at that person or what he's going through, and you reflect your own errors, your own
Right.
sins. So it was a purpose.
It's true. Being non-responsive, sometimes it just kind of like makes them stew with what they just did to you.
It separates like those who are going to go the wrong way and those who want to repent. I don't know. I kind of see that.
So this systematic dehumanization is part of the punishment for violating the laws of man, right? This is how crucifixions were not invented by the Romans. Who invented them? You know, Persians.
Persians, yeah.
The Romans did not invent it, but they thought, oh, that's so effective, we're going to use that. And they took it. They took it because their goal was to expand their empire and to make sure that nobody rebelled against them, because they were spread thin. And so they had to really make an example out of everybody. Does Jesus operate that way? Does Jesus, the government of God, does he operate that way? Because so they're like, you do not rebel us or else we will make you pay. This was the man, right? What does Jesus do when he was being beat? How did he respond?
Silent.
Forgive them, God. Or silence, right? And that's what you have to think about. Because this was a display of God's character in real time. Okay, it was happening right in front of you. And it was in complete contrast with the way man had fallen so badly that they were just willing to tear a human being, a being in the image of God. In this case, it was actually God, but they had done it to a bunch of other people. And they were okay with it. They could laugh about it. You and I, to see even a movie of what happened makes us cringe. But to see it in reality, it's a totally different thing. And for the soldiers, they were just like, okay, yeah, it's Wednesday or Thursday night or whatever. That's what they do, It had gotten that bad, right? The desensitization. I can't say it. Desensitization of their soul. Their soul to not love or to think that just somebody's just so disposable. And not just disposable. One thing it would be to kill them within but to just
Torture.
torture him, knowing he's innocent, right? So just keep that in mind. And I think that, God looked at people's hearts. He looked into their hearts. He was looking into their hearts as they were doing this. And he was probably felt worse because of that, because his goal to come here was to help people, to save them, right?
And Christ was saying, forgive them.
Right, exactly. So think about that. Think about God's character versus man's character. We know they're different, right? We see it over and over again. It says in the Bible over again, my thoughts are not like your thoughts. My ways are not like your ways. Look at it happening in real time, okay? So a question is, these men This is from the lesson. These men had no idea of what they were doing. How so? And then why, though, will their ignorance not excuse them on Judgment Day? Any thoughts?
Go ahead.
We'll go this way, counterclockwise.
Because, as the Bible indicates, God will give everybody a chance at some point to know of his existence and give them a chance to repent and come to him.
Okay.
That's my thought.
Even though they didn't know that he was God, they knew that he was a human being that was, you're not supposed to treat a human being that way.
Yeah.
So in that respect, what they did was wrong.
Sir? No? Okay. Okay, so what do you think Jesus meant? And you guys know probably, but I'm just going to walk through this logic because some people misunderstand what he's saying, right? Some people may misunderstand it. If you knew I could crush you, you wouldn't be doing this to me, right? And he could have crushed them, But is that the way Jesus is?
No.
Is that what he's about? And that's the point. So why did he want to forgive them?
That was his whole purpose.
That was his whole point of being there. That's why he was taking that punishment.
Yes.
Okay?
Out of love.
And guess what? He was able to make a difference even then. Everything he did, it wasn't just for us who read the Bible 2,000 years later. It was happening in real time. People were observing what he was doing. And he was transforming people, even when he was there.
Even on
And we
the
read
cross.
about 2 people, but I'm sure there were other people like, I can't believe this.
Pilate's wife.
Pilate's wife was touched by him, yeah.
He was, innocent. There was people in
Right.
the street, women crying for Jesus.
Right.
The man that helped Jesus carry the cross.
Right. He was transforming people in real time, right there. The thief right next to him, who started out making fun of him and mocking him, but by the time that one that had an open heart and was willing to see and not just be part of the crowd, they were both going to die. All 3 of them were going to die, but one of them still had an open heart and willingness and an open mind to see what was going on and say, wait a minute, Are we like that? I think so. Okay. All right, so the actual crucifixion. This is Tuesday's lesson. So the lesson actually calls Jesus a silent victim. Do you guys think he's a victim?
No, he's a willing participant.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Okay, so the lesson, I don't know what he meant by silent victim. Maybe he just meant physical victim. Like, yeah, I was hurting him and he was suffering a lot, so that kind of makes him a victim. But I think in the overall picture, I do not see him as a victim, even though he suffered a lot. And I would never do that to him or anybody else for that matter. But I don't see him as a victim. Why?
Gave himself willingly.
Right. Right. It was foreseen. It was prophesied. Right? Down to the year. Right? And he knew this. Right? And even our friend Peter, because if we think he was just a passive victim, it's just a victim and they just totally victimize them, we might make the same mistake as Peter, right? He wanted to protect Jesus. He loved Jesus, but he wanted to protect him because he didn't understand, right? And what did Jesus do? He did it twice, right? Once when he said it verbally, and Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan," which is pretty, that was pretty like a counter to what he was saying. And it probably took him back and like, what? But eventually he got it, right? Eventually he got it. But then when he chopped off the ear of the servant, yeah. And then Jesus rebuked them. He told him, "No, that's not why I'm here. They're going to take me." And then Jesus gave himself so that his disciples can move forward. And let me read, or somebody read to me John 15:13, because this is a beautiful thing that also encapsulates, just like worthy is the Lamb encapsulates what happened. This is also encapsulates what's going on here. John 15, verse 13. We know this one. We've heard it before, so as soon as somebody reads it, they'll know what I'm talking about.
Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends.
Did you hear that?
Yep.
Yeah. Did you guys hear that?
Yes.
Who did that?
Jesus.
Jesus, on many levels. He did it for his disciples. He did it for us. He did it for everybody. That is how Jesus' character is. That's what he is about. He taught us that. But he didn't just teach that. He showed us what that's all about. Okay? So, if he gave himself because he loved us, then you can't call him a victim on that level, right? Because he gave himself willingly, knowing what was going to happen. Okay. Also, you know, even when he was in Mountain of Olives and he was praying, right? And it shows in his prayer, he was asking God, hey man, if this doesn't have to happen. But he knew right away that it was God's will for it to happen. This is your will. I'm going through with it. Okay. So, all right, so we've talked about prophetic connections. We're going to go into Psalm 22. And, yeah, okay. All right. So let's go into the memory verse is Mark 15:34. I'll go ahead and read it. And in the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which is translated, my God, why have you forsaken me? Okay. So I'm going to read through this. In Psalm 22:1, it says almost word for word, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me and from the words of my groaning? Okay? We can do a whole quarter on this chapter, and I think we did a class on Psalm 22, because we did the Psalms, we did Isaiah, we studied this stuff, right? So there are various connections between Psalms and this event. So let's read some of them. In verse 18, they divided my garments among them, and for my clothes they cast lots, right? And then in verse 8, they said, he trusted the Lord, let him rescue him, let him deliver him, since he delights in him. And in Mark, it says he cannot save himself, right? And all this shows a lot of the misunderstanding that was going on between the people, the audience that was there, right? You put yourselves in their shoes and see how they were just misinterpreting things like one after the other. They thought they knew what he was saying. What did they think when he was saying, Eloi, Eloi?
That he was calling for Elijah.
They thought they were calling for Elijah. So usually when I talk about this, the Bible is telling you that people were misunderstanding even his words, right? They were misinterpreting what he was saying, right? And he was actually quoting prophecy. He was quoting prophecy.
But don't you think part of it has to do with their heart and their state of rebellion and hate towards God, and not even wanting to hear his words, not wanting even to recognize him, Jesus Christ at all, not even give him an opportunity. So how can they interpret anything? How can they understand?
It's possible, right? And so we shouldn't just say, oh, it was them. It could be us too, right? We have to really not just because somebody to the side of us saying they're looking at something a certain way. God wants us to reason for ourselves and read the Bible for ourselves and pray to God and ask for understanding ourselves, okay? Don't rely on somebody else to tell you what you're supposed to know. Sir?
I was going to say exactly that. I think a lot of times many people follow what the loud or what the leaders are doing. And I say the loud because
Or the expert, right?
The experts, they know, they do this or do that, and they follow. And unfortunately, they're like, oh well, he knows best. I'm going to follow what he said. And if they're saying crucify him, then I guess crucify him, right? They go with the flow, and many times we forget. And if you go back to Psalm, it's interesting because you're right. We went and we studied this. I mean, look at 16. in Psalms 22, talk about prophesy.
Yeah,
He's going
right.
back to scripture. For dogs have surrounded me. The congregation of the wicked has enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet.
Right. So there's two prophecies right there. The congregation of the wicked enclosing, and then they pierced my hands and feet.
So
That was going to be my next one.
yeah. So he's on the he's on the cross. He's going back to say, look, I'm fulfilling prophecy.
Okay. Thanks, Robert. So okay. So let me. Okay. So some of this I talked about. Okay.
But do you think Jesus said that just to fulfill prophecy, or was he feeling that too?
Oh yeah. Oftentimes there was either a dual prophecy, or because it happened even with the abomination of desolation. That was like a dual prophecy. He was talking about things that were happening immediately, and then he was going way into the future. So yeah, he was going through that. And like I said, that would probably there is a lot written about that, and that would probably require at least like a half an hour conversation, I think. And so I just want to finish some of the themes that I talked about, because we're already at 11, and so I know they're gonna shut us down. But I do want to talk about a couple of things. Let's read Galatians chapter 3:13. We're gonna read. Okay, why don't we do this? Who wants to read Galatians 3:13? You got it? Okay, who can read 2 Corinthians 5:21?
I got it.
Okay, and then I'll read Isaiah 53, 4 and 5. Go ahead with Galatians.
Galatians, what is it?
3:13.
Think about these scriptures, because they refer to what Jesus did, okay? Just like some of the other scriptures that we've been reading.
Galatians 3:13.
3:13.
Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree.
Okay, this is Jesus' sacrifice for us, right? Galatians saying he did it for us, okay? How about 2 Corinthians?
2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 21
Yeah.
says, "For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him."
Okay? So now we're looking at why he did this, right? And I'll read Isaiah 53, chapter 53, verses 4 and 5. Surely he has borne our griefs, he carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God and afflicted. So we misunderstood. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. Okay, so I want to end with this. There's this other stuff that I wanted to talk about, but I do want to talk about. We know that the temple, the curtain at the temple that separates,
veil.
from the Most High, was torn, right?
Yes.
And that is symbolic. Okay, that is symbolic of the fact that there was a new covenant. Whereas before we had to go through a priest and we had to use a sacrificial system to get to that point. Jesus made it possible for us to go directly to him, right? And so I wish I had the, okay, all right. So that was the new covenant, right? So maybe in John we'll get more into that, of what the new covenant exactly was. But in a nutshell, it's like Jesus says, I am the way. He created a new way for us to reach God, right? Through him directly. But there's a couple of things I wanted to say about a transformation for people who saw all of this happen, right? And okay, so yeah. So the tearing of the veil was symbolic of no more separation from the most holy place. We now have direct access through sacrifice of Jesus, and that's the fulfillment of the sacrificial system, right?
Yes.
And the other one, and in Hebrews 4:16 says, "Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need, right? So he's inviting us to come straight to him now, okay? So the second one I want, in Mark 15:39, it talks about a centurion, okay? He was in charge. He was in charge of all the people that were torturing and crucifying, right? He was in charge, so he had probably a lot of experience. He probably had seen many crucifixions. He's seen the reaction of the people. He's seen how they suffered. And he was at the point where he was probably one of the most desensitized people. You have to be. I don't know how anybody could survive watching other people suffer day in, day out. Okay? He was in charge, he was experienced, and his heart was hardened. And yet, what does he say? Truly, this man is the Son of God. Okay? So look at it on different levels. His heart changed to the point. He could have gotten in trouble for saying that. You said this is the Son of God? That's an affront to the emperor. Think about it. He got to the point where he was transformed. It was different. Let's this last one, let's think about what this says. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 18. And we can end with this. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, 18. So while they're looking for it, Jesus has shown us that he's willing to do whatever it takes to save us. Okay? Including sacrificing himself. Putting all his faith on the table and all his love on the table. Okay? And he actually expects the same from us. But how do we get there? How do we get to where we are now? If that's the case, to where we are. Because he wants us to be one with him. Meaning, we have to be of the same mindset, right? Of that love and faith. The love and trusting in God. Right? You ready?
Sure. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord.
So Jesus came here to show us, right? Not just tell us, but to show us who he is. And by beholding, we become transformed.
Amen.
If we separate ourselves from God, guess what's going to happen? We're going to separate our characters from him as well. And this is how far we could fall. But if we get closer to him, we will achieve that. And that's what 2 Corinthians 3:18 is saying. By beholding, we become transformed.
Glory to glory.
So if you think something's supposed to happen like in a snap, like it may take a while, but don't let go of God. Do what Jacob did and hold on to him. No matter what. You know, the waves are crashing into you, the wind is blowing you. Hold on to God, and he will get you to where you need to go. Okay? All right, guys. There's more here, but you know how it is. All right, let's bow our heads. Dear Lord, Father in heaven, we thank you so much. So much for your love. The love you gave us, so much that you gave your son for us, Lord. Thank you so much. Thank you for not just for his sacrifice, but for his example that you give to us and the teachings and for your word that we have, that we can keep going back and beholding what you've done for us, Lord. Thank you so much. Lord, please stay with us no matter what, no matter how difficult things get. Let's keep remembering. Remember what you've done for us, whether it's something small or something great, but always remembering that huge sacrifice that can't even be measured, Lord. We thank you so much, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.